the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Welcome into the latest edition of the Spot Track Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here, along with Mike Giannetti. This episode presented by Better Edge. Beat the odds by joining America's top peer-to-peer betting platform. You can beat the odds by eliminating the house altogether. It's the future of sports betting, and we've got a promo code for you to get in the door. Sign up for the first time. You get $20 on the house. Just use the promo code SPOTTRACK at sign up. That's betteredge.com or on their mobile app. So it's been a busy time in the contract calendar year. I would have thought that the NBA was keeping you more busy than anything else. But when I asked you this the other day off to the side, the NHL was getting a little bit of love. Then I started digging into some of their transactions. Well, that is a busy offseason that they've got in front of them as well. So which one has been racking your brain more over the last couple of days?
From a data input standpoint, it's definitely the NHL. This is just the transactional league, right? So it's it's not just 15 to 20, 7 to 8 year extensions and blockbuster trades, but all of these minor league contracts that add up to dozens and dozens of work. So it's definitely the larger data work, but the NBA remains undefeated in terms of owning the real estate inside of my head and where things could be headed, because it just kind of writes its own content. We have so many tangents to go on today with what has happened over the past 48 hours. And by the way, the best part is that none of it's really official. So you've got superstars like Keith Smith trying to actually project what could become of sign-in trades and things like that could be layered on. We don't even have official news on any of these Lakers signings or this Houston stuff. And there could be some absolute haymakers still to come based on what we know from a preliminary standpoint. So the NBA is undefeated, but the NHL is the kind of the workhorse in terms of how to get through this week.
And I think part of that is just this is becoming ingrained in the culture of the NBA over the years. And it's certainly not the free agency period that we were used to in the past with LeBron hosting TV specials and all of that. But I do think that has created a bit of a culture of this is a portion of the NBA calendar year that NBA fans will section off this portion of their year to dedicate their mind space to that league. It is interesting, though, that the NHL and the NBA have a free agency period at the same time. And maybe they're fishing in a different barrel. I don't know. There could be an argument for that. But it seems like the NHL promotionally would perhaps want to have their own lane.
No, it's definitely, perpendicular, not parallel in terms of how these two leagues are operating. But what's fascinating about the NHL, and maybe we'll dive in a little bit here, but they are in the midst of renegotiating a CBA. It seems pretty healthy. It seems like it's going to get to the finish line, but a lot of the discussions and a lot of what appears to be changing is contractual, is the percent of cap, is the length of these contracts in terms of free agents or signing your own players, things that have existed, but are just being kind of tampered down a little bit. For instance, how much of a contract can be allocated to signing bonus is a big conversation piece right now. And in your neck of the woods, I think that's a big one because of it's a tax-free state. There have been a lot of pushes for Canadian contracts specifically to be heavy signing bonus because it can somewhat evade the tax purposes and the jock tax that goes with it. That's going to be clamped down a little bit. That has major state and federal implications, as you might imagine, and then league implications. So there's a lot of money being talked within the NHL that isn't necessarily being driven towards the actual contracts being signed, but maybe there's a ramp up to get some big contracts in right now because of the unknown and uncertainty of what may be this time next year.
There's a million different directions that we can go here. I think I could get off on several tangents based on the preface to our podcast, but I'm gonna see if I can keep us on track here a little bit because there are so many different directions that we can go in today. Let's talk about the movers and shakers in the NBA. Who has recently changed their tax level based on the way things have gone so far in this offseason? Because that seems to be the biggest portion of this NBA conversation, are teams that are avoiding the first apron, scared to death of the second apron, or those that are just saying, screw it, we're going all in, and those that are aborting it like the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, Boston's trying like heck to get under that second apron. I don't think they have a pathway to get there, despite the fact that they have, made some significant moves to clean up their roster a little bit. I'll put it this way, because I know we're going to talk about these two teams specifically. The injuries to Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton have clearly made a bigger impact to the upcoming season than we imagined. It does appear as if both of those teams are treating 2025-26, Indiana and Boston, as a bit of a gap year, as a bit of we're going to use this to clean up our finances a little bit, and then we will certainly come back and address things as needed in 2026. But I didn't see that coming, especially because those are both Eastern Conference teams, and they should be able to hold the fort down to a degree, to be a 4-5 seed, 3-4 seed, and make some hay in the postseason. It doesn't appear as though Indiana specifically with this Miles Turner news is in that business right now. And that's good news for teams like Detroit and Atlanta, who, like I opened with, things could change with how things are actually finalized. But man, does it appear that both of those teams have taken a step forward in the Eastern Conference. And we haven't even talked about the Clevelands and the Knicks of the world, who I think both got deeper over the past couple of days here in the early off season. So that's the Eastern Conference, Brandon. The Western Conference,
did leave out my Orlando Magic. Don't think
we've already talked about them. Okay. They are supplanted as one of the projected top 4 seeds in the East just with that early trade, just by getting it done before it even started. But the West is a mess, and Houston and Denver have aggressively fixed their roster, changed their roster. But Denver has a chance to not only be better, but also be under the tax. That's God's work early on here for a team that has Nikola Jokic. So that's the team financially we're watching to see just how aggressive they're going to get. And then certainly we can smoothly transition into what Milwaukee has done, because I think that's been the biggest news of the week.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure smooth is the right word for it. I'm a little bit on the fence with how to perceive this, because my initial reaction when they moved off of Damian Lillard, they waived that giant contract, they trade Pat Connaughton, and then the news comes out that Giannis knew nothing about this and was not happy. Whether that's true or not, it felt like it in the moment. My initial reaction was they are now deciding we are going in a completely opposite direction from winning. And then they signed Miles Turner, who was the prized free agent of this class. And then I completely flipped to the other side and went, well, Damian Lillard wasn't going to play this season anyway. Pat Connaughton's just a role piece that was probably overpaid. And now I kind of like Milwaukee's roster all of a sudden. So you tell me, financially speaking, is Milwaukee acting shrewdly, strategically? Does this flurry of moves make sense to you, or does it feel like Giannis panic because they know if they don't do things right, he's going to walk into that front office and say, trade me somewhere else?
There's only one way that these collective moves, and, Dame being waived is the cause that became the Miles Turner effect. The Milwaukee Bucks can't even legally sign Miles Turner without the cap space that was freed up by waiving Damian Lillard. There's only one way that any of this works and makes sense, and we won't know for 10 months. And that way is that they win the East, right? Which, if you think about it just in really simple terms, okay, the Knicks finally figured out a coaching situation, but that could take a minute to actually get its legs, even though that's a deep roster. Atlanta has just made a slew of changes, which could take a minute. And by making this move Milwaukee has made, they have made the Indiana Pacers worse. There's no question about that. In 2025-26, with no Halliburton and now no Miles Turner, they are a worse team. So there's a path that this aggressiveness, which is not short-term, it's long-term, could win them the Eastern Conference in the upcoming season. Outside of that, this is a nightmare. I can't wrap my head around this from a basketball standpoint and certainly not from a business standpoint, because on its face, Brandon, they are paying Miles Turner $45 million a year. That's what this is. This is a $26 million contract for Miles Turner plus $22.5 million per year, paying Damian Lillard to walk away.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
This is a $45 to $48 million per year for the next 4 years. Cash and cap hit for Miles Turner. That's ridiculous. That's egregious, right? Nobody even thought he was a $25 million player, let alone a $45 million. So it's an all-in move for the upcoming season. And when you think about that even one step further, which is they're trying to keep Giannis from publicly demanding a trade, right? That's the overall overarching goal of this entire franchise right now. I guess this is a step forward, but only if they win the upcoming season. And if they don't, Giannis is out, right? He's going to make that demand. And now you're stuck with 4 more years of Dame dead cap and 3 more years of guaranteed Miles Turner contract, which is a nightmare to have to try to rebuild around. So it's aggressive and it's markedly reckless.
But was there any way around this though? If you really think about it,
yeah, you trade Giannis Antetokounmpo. No, I think that was the right business move, and I'm pretty sure you and I came to that agreement not too long ago on this podcast. That was the better business move, despite the fact that it torpedoes, your chances to win in a weak Eastern Conference. I just don't know if this made them that much better on the court. I really don't. I know Brook Lopez was way past his prime, but you could have brought him back at what, 2 for 20? You know what I mean? As just a stopgap, and then brought in somebody young and some 2-way contract to sort of fill the void. And I'm downplaying how good Miles Turner can be. He's just not consistently good. He's not consistently one of your top 2 or 3 players on the court at any point in time, which means that Kyle Kuzma has to be for this team, and that's terrifying.
Well, yes. Those other guys, the Kevin Porter Juniors of the world and the Kyle Kuzmas, you're relying on those guys to be star role players, and that is asking a lot. I would push back on. I think this is a smart business move. Winning a title would be obviously the ultimate goal, but if they're just able to keep Giannis for the rest of his career until he completely falls off, I think this is a smart move.
You think the fans will continue to buy in enough to make it worth it?
Absolutely. Yeah. You'll keep you think about it from the team revenue perspective. You keep the season tickets, you keep playoff viability, you keep jersey sales, all of those things. You're on the national spotlight. You're going to get those primetime games if you have Giannis, as long as he doesn't leave. I think the disaster is if he still says, I don't want to be here anymore. Then we're going to look back on this as one of the dumbest moves and a panic decision that we've seen from an NBA team.
And I guess my point is that is probably only one off season away. You've probably only secured yourself 10 to 12 months of take a deep breath, everybody. That's it. Because I can tell you right now, just looking at some of the odds around the sport books, Milwaukee's like 8th to win the Eastern Conference right now. 8th. So this move didn't do anything to make anyone, attached to this stuff think that they have a legitimate chance to even win their own conference, let alone get back to the finals. So it's not a move that I think a lot of people are looking at and saying, well, it's got tons of upside. I don't think it has tons of upside. There's not a big ceiling on this move, but what there is a hell of a lot of money. Okay. And a hell of a lot of money for the Dame Lillard situation. For those who haven't seen it exactly, it's 5 years at $22.5 million of dead cap per year. That's cash and cap that Milwaukee has to take on every single year. That's how their books start. They are minus 22.5 against the cap and the tax every single year because of what they've done here. That immediately makes them less powerful and less aggressive every offseason. So yeah, the path forward got worse, not better. And I know that Miles Turner can play some ball. So if this looks decent over the next 10 months, then maybe I can agree with you. Maybe they can talk themselves into, well, we've secured Giannis. That's all that matters to this franchise. I just don't think this was the singular move to do that. There was probably a depth trade right, out there, or two. Like the Pat Connaughton trade, 2 or 3 of those was all that had to happen here, I think, to really get everybody invested in, we're going to rebuild this thing quickly, but we're not going to destroy ourselves in doing so. That's what they've done, right? And the only way to fix this, if this doesn't go well, is to trade Giannis in 12 months. So just get ready for another offseason of the Milwaukee Bucks, because they did it to themselves this time around.
That's how desperate these franchises are, especially those in the middle of America, to hang on to stars of this caliber. I think you kind of have to put yourself out there or hit abort. And if you weren't willing to do that, then you have to try and win. And then the only way to do that was to move off of the Damian Lillard contract in order to bring in new talent. And they've definitely put themselves into a corner. Now, as far as Damian Lillard goes, he's going to end up signing somewhere else. But will he sign for a vet minimum? Are we looking at $2 million a year because he's already banking so much cash, or because he's still somewhat of a commodity? I think there are going to be 3 teams that are pretty in on him.
Yeah.
Do you think he's able to double dip here where he can create a mini bidding war? I don't think that, even looking at this most optimistically payment wise, we're looking at somebody that's going to hit $10 million a year. But is it as simple as, I just think he's just going to sign wherever he wants for the lightest contract possible? Do you think that's going to happen, or will he get more than that?
It's a really unique situation, and I'm going to admit out loud that I don't know the best way forward on this one, because I don't think he can play much ball, if any ball, for the upcoming season. So
it's an 8 to 12 month recovery, and he got hurt in the playoffs. So, and he's 34 years old. Chances are 90% he's not playing a single minute in the upcoming season.
And in baseball, what you do is you sign a player to essentially a minimum contract in year 1 with a significant team option in year 2 to give everybody a chance to have at least some control over the situation. And he's picking a team he wants to go to, right? This happens kind of frequently. Well, but in the NBA, there's rules on how the percentage increase of that second salary can go. So to tell me he's going to be on a minimum contract this year while he rehabs, but then be on a $20 million potential option next year, that's just not feasible in how the math works with the NBA. So it might be better for everybody if he just doesn't sign a contract this season. If he just rehabs on his own in Portland, where he wanted to be, clearly, and then kind of does his work to market himself to all the teams he wants to go to for this time next offseason, and puts himself in a situation where he can sign a 1+1 with a player option and have a little bit more control over maybe what could be his last contract as an NBA player. I might be wrong on this, and maybe Keith Smith and some of those other experts can chime in otherwise, but I wouldn't expect a minimum salary this year, because it essentially torpedoes his ability to earn anything next year, despite the fact that he's making $22.5 million from the Milwaukee Bucks next year.
I think you're spot on. If you're going to rehab all year anyway, what's the rush in signing anywhere? DeAndre Ayton cleared waivers. He is now an LA Laker. They're going to pay him $16.6 million over the next 2 seasons. How does his previous buyout play into that figure at all? I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, but at a higher salary. It feels like that's a thing more so in other sports than we see in the NBA. You just get to pocket the cash and then start anew.
Yeah, he's getting $25.5 million, but here's how it works in the NBA, because it's not like it's set in stone like with an NFL contract where we know what the dead cap essentially would be, right? That happened with Dame Lillard because they just flat out cut him. There was no negotiation, right? I'm not even sure Dame's agent saw this coming, right? It was just, we're doing this because we need this for our immediate cap table to work. With Ayton, they negotiated a buyout. So there was a price point where DeAndre Ayton's agent went out to a couple of teams, specifically the Lakers, and figured out where they needed to be financially speaking, and then just essentially lopped off that amount from the Portland Trailblazers on his way out. So he's still making $25.5 million from Portland this year, and now he has the ability to go out and earn about $8.1 million from the Lakers, and then $8.5 million in 2026. But that's a player option where he'll have some control over that. So look, I guess this was kind of a last resort for both sides here. Doesn't it feel that way? And to think that a last resort just guaranteed himself $16.5 million, that's how crazy this NBA money is. Because this guy, yes, he's at 12-10, pretty easily. And the Lakers need that 12 and 10, especially with his size in the middle as a 5. But I'm not sure there's 5 other teams signing up for this contract for DeAndre Ayton. So this was a desperation move, I think, from both sides. And I think that the people that win the most here is Portland, who didn't want anything to do with him. They kind of crushed him on the way out the door. If you saw some of those hit pieces, which we become prone to seeing as players leave cities. This is not a motivated,
hardest worker in the planet.
That's right. This is not a motivated basketball player, and he hasn't been since day one. That was the knock on him being taken number 1 overall. Well, he's joining a team where if that's the case with LeBron James, look out, because his career is going to be over before he even gets to that player option. So, like I said, desperation move for both sides, but I kind of like what Portland's done here this offseason. Is my takeaway from this is they are not screwing around, and I expect them to be active with maybe one more big swing here to lop on to what they've done with Drew Holiday and some of those some young kids, some draft picks.
So my quick DeAndre Ayton story. So I'm in the arena, the Magic Arena, really early for pretty much every home game throughout the season. So I watched these guys warm up home and away. And it was DeAndre Ayton that still sticks in my mind almost as much as anybody else. For the opposite sort of warm up that you would get from Steph Curry is Steph. If you go out of your way, if you're ever able to go to an arena early and watch Steph Curry warm up in person, it is theater. It is strategic. He's surgical. DeAndre Ayton, before the game, you have limited time on the court to get yourself ready. Practice those shots. Most guys only practice shots they're going to take in the game. DeAndre Ayton was shooting half court jumpers from the logo.
So he was doing the Steph Curry warm up.
Yes, exactly. Except he's not Steph Curry. It wasn't like it was like he was actually attempting this, like he was going to try it in the game. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? It was so weird.
He's warmed up. He's warmed up.
Nobody does that. I just need you to understand that is unique, and to me, it told me everything I needed to know. Probably unfair, but then the hit pieces came out. Well, let's talk about the shiny new Shai Gilgeous-Alexander deal. 4 years, Supermax, worth $285 million. That'll be worth $79 million per year by the time we get to 2030.
Yeah.
You forecasted this on a podcast that we did together probably a year ago. So this is not shocking information to you, but now that it's here, how incredible is it that we have gotten to this point?
Well, just a quick disclaimer off the top, because I have to be a company man here. The numbers that we're hearing internally at SpotTrack from the league, in terms of the league salary cap over the next couple of seasons, we know pretty much that next year is going to jump 7%. Now this year jumped 10. So there's going to be a bit of a rollback in how much the cap jumps next year. And then a lot of the networks are jumping back up to 10%, which gets us to this 4-year, $285 million contract for Shai in 2027. That's not exactly what we're hearing. In fact, we're hearing it might actually drop to like 5 in a couple of years, and they may do a little bit of a recoup as they ramp up for the next CBA and things like that. So just a disclaimer that this might not actually be a 4 for 285 when it's all said and done. It might be more like a 272, which actually takes it under 70 million a year. So it's great. Let's market it right now. I know the agent's trying to push it out there as much as possible, but it's just delaying the inevitable, which is we are getting to 70 million a year. We are getting to 80 million a year. And by the time some of these superstars like Cooper Flagg, become second and third contracts, we're going to have 100 million a year. That the league is not unhealthy by any means. The streaming money is still there. The gambling money is still coming. But just a disclaimer that this 285 might not actually be 285 when we get to 2027.
Well, we'll see about the gambling money. I got something to throw at you for quick hits. We'll get to that. Do you think that we're ever going to reach the point where it's just not financially smart to sign your superstars to long-term deals? We kind of had this conversation.
Yeah.
If you were going to support the Dallas Mavericks for trading Luka Doncic, the argument would be it is now so punitive to sign your superstar in the NBA to a supermax that if you don't believe they are going to be good or in shape by the time they get to the end of this deal, it's just simply not worth it. Now, I still think that they could have gotten a whole lot more for Luka Doncic, but that's a separate conversation. The idea being, when you only have 5 players on the court at a time, you have limited rosters. One player is that impactful, but if they are diminished in any way, you've got no chance of winning a championship. It's a difficult conversation to have, because for so long in the league, having that one star is what got you the championship. Yet now, the way that the CBA is built, it has rewarded parity and depth, and it's hard to have depth if you're paying somebody $70 million a year.
It's going to be really hard for the players and the Players Association to ever get to that point, I think, right? Because so much of this league is formulaic and percentage based, and it's just math, right? People always ask, how do Scott Allen and Keith Smith have these salaries up 45 seconds after the deal is announced? It's math, right? They are projecting a cap. There's a percentage derived from that cap, and then there's a percent increase on the salaries, right? And if you start to play around with that, and if players start to take hometown discounts or start to say no here and there, well, now you're just doing a disservice to the actual formulaic process that the league has established, right? And you can say that that's good business, right? Jalen Brunson has done this for the Knicks, and look at how deep the Knicks are able to get in terms of being able to bring in new bodies every offseason. Can other teams follow suit? Of course they can. But LeBron James isn't doing that anymore, right? Kobe Bryant never did that. The top stars in the league will tell the rest of the league, and that's why they sit on the board as player reps for a lot of these conversations. Take as much as you possibly can. Take as much as the math says you're allowed to take, because the second you don't, it opens the door for the league to step in the next time around and say, well, look what's happening. These players aren't even maxing out anymore. There must be too much to go around. Let's dial everything back and try to make this a little bit more friendly. The second you open the door, the owners will take it, because that's why they're owners. That's how they got to where they are in the first place. So I don't think we'll see team-friendly deals or, coming from players anytime soon, but you may see some CBA changes. For instance, the reason that Shai Gilgeous is on a 285 right now is because he was an All-NBA MVP, and he earned the right to jump up a percentage threshold from 30% to 35%. Is that supermax something that's going to be a point of contention in the next CBA, right? Will you have to be in the league for 10 years or 7 years specifically to get to that 35%, even though you're a superstar and a 2-time MVP in this league? That might be contended, because teams will say, well, it's great that we've got the MVP, but we can't do anything about it if he's making $100 million a year, right? And the cap is 180. That might be a big point of contention. So look out for that noise and some changes specific to the formula. But I don't think the players will ever give in to the point of where you've got major superstars across the league taking markedly less to build out the rosters, because it's just not good business to do so, Brandon. It's just not.
So the players might not, but what about the teams? What about looking at this through a Major League Baseball lens, where you've got some organizations that just say, we would rather moneyball this, not only to save ourselves the money, but also because we think it's the smarter way to build a roster?
There are too many young, fresh owners in this league, and it only takes one to sign that player to that contract. And I don't think we'll get 30 teams, or if expansions hit 32 teams, all on board with, we're going to clamp down on these players because they don't deserve it. They're printing money. Okay. They are printing money left and right now. The valuations on these teams, whether it's Milwaukee, whether it's Minnesota, whether it's certainly the Lakers and the Celtics, the valuations are skyrocketing. So if you can't afford to pay your player, sell the team, because you can make a hell of a lot of money doing that right now too. So I don't think there'll be much movement on, an overall general clampdown yet. But look, once we get to the 100 million mark and that number hits, that number is, you don't go back from that number. You know what I mean? Like, that's a number that becomes a worldwide phenomenon. And we are damn close to that number being across the league with 3-4 players, right? The Cooper Flag era is going to graduate to that number eventually here. So I do think there'll be a point of contention when it becomes the big news. But doesn't it feel like Shai Gilgeous making $70 million isn't big enough news? it feels like it's comfortable. It feels like we can all just handle this and swallow this because this is the nature of sports right now. And it's why people like me have been doing this stuff for 20 years. It's just getting bigger and bigger.
There has to be, and nobody knows the answer to this. We'll know it when we get there.
Yeah.
There has to be a point where the bubble bursts, where you have athletes that are no longer rich. They're wealthy. And there's a difference in motivation, in care. And at some point, somebody's going to look around and go, I have 17 yachts. I don't care if we win this game.
Can I tell you something, though? The fact that Cooper might be this first mega billionaire in the league in the next 7-8 years, and that I laid out on Twitter and on the podcast last week, that dude's hungry, man. I feel like if the league is going to have one person to be the spokesmodel, the spokesperson for being a billionaire on the court, they picked the right guy, because this guy's not going to cheap out. He is not going to be the guy that just walks away and says, I'm generationally wealthy for the rest of my life, and so are the next 4 generations below me. He's going to be a phenomenal flag bearer for being ridiculously wealthy and loving the game of basketball. They kind of picked their spot right here in terms of the timeline.
Flag bearer. You think I didn't notice that? That was really
nice,
good.
Right? Let's
get to our quick hits. Absolutely. I mean, you got it right there. Let's get to our quick hits to wrap today's episode. The NHL has had a flurry of news as well. Can you give me the bullet points that we need in order to stay caught up? I know that this is probably a short question with a long answer, but as much as you can condense it for the hockey fans listening, Mitch Marner dealt from the Leafs to the Vegas Golden Knights. You get the Florida Panthers. They're signing deals left and right to maintain the championship roster that they've built. So what can you tell me about where we're at in the NHL?
Florida and Edmonton still super good, super aggressive in retaining and adding some depth. I like, a lot of people hate what the Kings have done, but man, just another LA team going berserk in the offseason, right? They're trying to become relevant again out west. I love that. In terms of the East, I think the Devils have made some really smart moves, and both via trades and via free agency. And you mentioned Marner. Marner got $12 million a year from Vegas on a sign-in trade, and the league is investigating collusion. So stay tuned on that one, because you put a couple of sports teams in Vegas, something's bound to go wrong, and here we are. Something has apparently gone wrong.
Apparently, he had his eyes set on Vegas about in the middle of the season. So not surprised there. Darren Waller has a new home in Miami, Florida. He's going to come out of retirement for the Dolphins. He becomes the 3rd tight end to do that. And about the last 7 years, Jason Witten, Rob Gronkowski being the others, mixed results in terms of how that looks on the field. But what are we looking at in terms of salary, and what do you think about the way the Dolphins navigated this portion of the offseason?
I mean, it sounds like it's got a $5 million max. I'd be shocked if it was a base of more than near the minimum, $1.25 million. I think it's going to be right around there. Still waiting for the full details on it, but it's going to be heavily incentive laden. Let's put it that way. And I'm kind of out of words on Miami here, Brandon. I don't quite understand the plan to include Jonnu Smith in that trade with Ramsey was already questionable, because Smith had a phenomenal season with Tua last year. He was kind of the stopgap that Tua needed to at least keep afloat in a few games. And it felt like that was going to transition nicely into maybe even a bigger role in 2025. And this was the plan. This was plan B, was to take Darren Waller out of retirement and slap him into an offense that he has absolutely zero comfort in. And he's just going to walk into training camp kind of cold. I don't love this one at all. I don't love much of anything that the Miami Dolphins have done over the past 12 months. But I'm willing to be optimistic, because I understand that there's an offensive guru who can make some things work at times, and maybe he can just hit lightning in a bottle on this one. But I thought they had a bigger fish when they included Jonnu Smith in that deal. But it feels like Pittsburgh just kind of stole this one, because I think Jonnu and that Arthur Smith offense in Pittsburgh is absolutely going to flourish, especially with Freiermuth and a couple other weapons around him. And I'm not sure Miami got anything out of this deal.
I don't understand how you trade a tight end to the Steelers, who have Pat Freiermuth, one of the better receiving tight ends in the NFL, and Darnell Washington, one of the better run blocking tight ends in the NFL. They now have 3, and you didn't get one of them. But I'm with you. It makes absolutely no sense. I do like the fact that Minkah Fitzpatrick is back with the Dolphins, but I also understand that he's past his prime. So I don't know how much you have dug into this big, beautiful bill. And I promise for those listening, we're not talking politics here, but there is a portion of this bill from our president that could become quite burdensome to sports bettors. The proposed bill suggests that sports bettors that reach a certain threshold of winnings would have to also deduct their losses, making sports betting success virtually impossible. If you were to do the math on this, essentially, if you were to say bet $100,000 and you win 110, you net $10,000, but the IRS would say that you made 59,000. There's just no way to win in that regard. Now, a lot of us aren't betting that with that much coin, but is this something that you think people should worry about that like to bet on sports like we do?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things inside of this bill that we should worry about, but to keep it to sports, yes and no. I'm gonna glass half full this, because I actually think that the overarching theme of why this exists is to suppress the average Joe from going bonkers in sports gambling, right? Like let's put some kind of guardrail in that doesn't allow drunk Mike in the middle of February to just go bonkers, go haywire on player props when I have no business doing so, right? So let's put some sort of threshold in from an actual earnings standpoint that says, okay, but if you go over this, it's not just a tax problem. There's a back pay problem, right? There's some sort of extra guardrail that should stop us average people from getting to that point. Now, the people that do this for a living, they're not going to love this, okay? Because this is essentially double jeopardy for them, is really what it is to a certain degree, right? They can win, but winning's actually going to hurt them if they do it with volume, if they gamble with volume, which is really the only way to make money, unfortunately. Right. Okay, so it's
really, it hurts the professionals. It's not going to hurt the average. That is the way that I perceive it. I just needed to ask somebody that's more financially savvy.
But it's also going to stop the average Joe from trying to become a professional in certain instances without the proper ability to do so. So I do think it's promising that there is some sort of restriction coming in, but I don't know. It seems like it's really hurting the people that are trying to do this for a living. And I kind of dig that. I like people that play fantasy sports for a living. I think that's a pretty freaking cool thing to do. So if that's rolled into this as well, then that kind of stinks, because that's a market that I follow quite closely.
Well, I gamble often, but I'm not a professional. You're not a professional until it's the main source of your income. That's my personal criteria for what a sports betting professional is. But the dream was always there, Mike, and now the dream is dying. So smooth transition to our Better Edge bet of the week. You picked up a rare Mets victory last week, which has been really tough to come by. So I would like to go back to the well here. I'm going to take the Brewers today with Jose Quintana on the mound, 6-2 this season. Mm-hmm. Would you like to take your Mets again?
Yeah, I think there's a reason he's not with the Mets this year. And I realize that the numbers look good, but there's something about coming back to your old stadium and playing your old lineup. So I'm in. Give me the Mets for back-to-back wins here. I love it.
All right. Let's see if we can see if we can break that Mets streak here on the pod. This episode has been presented by Better Edge. Sign up, try it out, bet with your friends, bet with us over on betteredge.com or on the mobile app. Use the promo code SPOTTRACK at sign up and get $20 upon your first arrival. Do us a favor and subscribe and rate the pod you're enjoying right now. And make sure you visit SPOTTRACK.com for all of the latest in the sports contractual world. Till next time, Mike.